In the past, we saw ourselves as subject to forces beyond our control or understanding, whether natural causes or fate. We saw ourselves in relation to gods who had particular roles. Changes in the natural world and changes in our fate were determined by a god whose role it was to be paternalistic, threatening, vain, or various other set roles that impacted our lives. We couldn't explain these forces so well in scientific terms, so we looked to the gods. Now, we know the causes of most minute changes in the physical world. As a result, the task that comes to us is not to work hard to survive in the hope that fate doesn't throw us a bad hand, but to micromanage every aspect of our existence, or to pass on the responsibility to a handful of specialists around the fringes of our lives. Since fate is now potentially right here in our own hands, we look inwards. The response to stimuli must be informed by our reasoning minds. The looking inwards folds in on itself in increasing layers of self-awareness, until self-analysis becomes a process of attempting to unravel layers of subjectivities. Literature and other media, therefore, becomes increasingly obsessed with subjectivity, of the reader, viewer, listener, of the characters, of the layers of reflection and inwards turning. Shakespeare's characters see themselves as acting parts, fulfilling roles. Directors manipulate our empathy through camera angles. Singers of cover versions ask us to see them simultaneously as themselves and as someone else. And we become accustomed to interpreting art, media, and ourselves in layers of subjectivities. When we engage with media on an authentic level, taking the work or text for what it is, a rich combination of aesthetics, narratives, and metaphors, we can grow as human beings from our interaction with it. We can understand better ourselves and the world around us, putting our feeling or action into the reasoned ideas our brains have taken in elsewhere. The temptation, though, is to repeat the learned pattern of folding inwards, which, seemingly paradoxically, takes the form of engaging with media on a surface level. We identify with a character and relate their actions and motivations to our own. Taking this further, we might fetishize the characters, reducing them to the object of what they mean to us. Characters can become designed as subjects to be identified with. But if a character is designed to be identified with, they lose a part of their potential self that would make them a real, yet fictional, person, instead becoming a series of traits common to or identifiable to a predicted audience. The danger is that we apply the same inhuman shallowness to ourselves. We frame our self-knowledge around a collection of identifiable traits, as if we were a character to sell to an audience, to keep them seeing parts of themselves in us, to give them a selfish motivation to keep reading. In our attempts at self-preservation, in a world where we have more knowledge than we know what to do with, humans gaze in on themselves further and further until what is left at the very core is a non-human mesh of categories, symbols, and recycled narratives. There is no place for growth here. No recognition that works of art can be engaged with on their own as complex tools for understanding how our consciousness fits into the world. Each work becomes only relevant for how it fits into a category of similar subject matters or genres, or what it can tell us about our surface level actions and desires, or how it can help us to neatly summarize our messy human selves as a series of plot lines. Categories are comforting. Fetishization is fun, but they distract from the deeper task of creating things and interpreting created things as ways to understand and come to terms with the place of our consciousnesses in the world. I have a deep craving for non-branded music, non-renovated cafes and pubs, real spaces and real aesthetics that I witness rapidly disappearing around me. I want houses that are not designed to look good in magazines, bedrooms that are not designed to look good on Instagram, people who don't brand themselves to be easily understood, identified with, or avoided. And I want media that teaches us to look outwards, not to self-focus so much, to not categorize and fetishize ourselves, to teach me how to live in a world where I know my own heart rate and when the next storm is coming, to hold fate in our own hands without folding inwards in concentric circles of self-consciousness. Hey, my name is Izzy, and I'm one of the partners of Felix, and this week Felix and I have decided to do a bit of a switcheroo. So he has presented on my radio show analysing songs and music and relating them to philosophy and cultural ideas and various debates, and I'm doing Felix's philosophy video. So this particular bit of writing was inspired by Susan Sontag and her writings on interpretation, especially interpreting art. She's quite critical of the way in the modern world, or at least when she wrote it in like 70s and stuff, of the way that we are interpreting media around us, in particular art. And that we're not really taking the artwork and the media for what it really is and what it's really communicating, but that potentially we're relating it too much to other things, extended metaphors, identity politics. And this is something I realised that I myself might be doing and have done for half a decade, really. It's really important to acknowledge identity politics and to talk about it. It's really important to do so in order to get rid of or diminish racism, transphobia, sexism, and all these sorts of things. But there is a danger that we put this in such a way that we forget what the actual piece of art is meant to communicate, and we can potentially become better people by interpreting art and seeing the world in a more complex way, and that potentially our misinterpretations of things or attempt to interpret things in a certain way is perhaps getting rid of that and our ability to grow as people. So that's where these thoughts come from, really.